from. We'd like to thank you for joining the last session in this series, and we'll be posting a second series around optimizing leaders and talent. So stay tuned for that. If you just introduce yourself in the chat, your name, your company, your title. We just want to know a little bit more about who's on the Fireside chat, and then we'll give you an opportunity if you want a replay or any of the information to provide your email address so that we can send you the recap. So I am Tiki Favorat, Senior Partner and Managing Director here at HR & Co. We love all things people. We enjoy the people chaos, and we actually help our clients, whether it's strategy, staff augmentation, or working on specific projects, end-to-end HR do that. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Allison, and then we'll get started.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this last session of this series. But don't worry, Tiki and I are going to do more. So we're super excited for the feedback that you've given us. And we have found that not only has it been helpful for you all, but it's also been helpful for us too. It's our way of giving back to our community of professionals, to our clients, especially in an interesting time for us to be thinking about things differently. And so my name is Allison Nail-Malone of Malone Consultants Group, where we think, be, and do leadership differently. So today our topic is going to be centered around the best practices before they have ever been best practices, centered around sustaining inclusion, agility, and flexibility. So Tiki, if you'll kind of review some of the housekeeping things, and then we'll get to our first poll.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a fireside chat. You know, the whole purpose of these was just to kind of quieten the chatter and the noise. There's a lot of information out there that we believe is reputable. We're constantly on webinars and looking at new information. So just as we get started, this is an intimate setting. If you're at your email address, if you want the official Q&A, introduce yourself so we'll know who's here. If you have a question, you can ask in the chat. You can take yourself off mute. Again, this is more of an intimate setting, so we can engage with you and get your questions answered. And then obviously, if there's something that we can help you do that you want to take offline, you can email myself or Allison for us to be able to brainstorm and go deeper with you on any of these topics. So feel free to participate, share your best practices, because this is a community of love, and we want to be able to help each other as we begin to see the second wave of this. We talked about preparing to reopen, so we're already ahead of the curve a little bit, and so now we want to talk about the next step in that. So that's our housekeeping. Over to you, Allison.
Yeah, awesome. So as you know, for those of you that are, it looks like everyone has been here at least once. We always encourage engagement, both from the chat session, the chat area, to utilizing your phone or a browser on your phone or your PC. And of course, just as a plug for Poll Everywhere, which they have not paid me for this promotion, that this is a great tool to have engagement with your people as a check-in. There is a free option, but then of course you can increase the engagement for an additional amount. But this is how you're going to get to our first poll. You can either pull up a browser, which is pollev.com/AllisonN677, or open up a text message, enter 22333 with Allison N67 plus whatever your response is going to be. And it's going to be our first multiple choice question. So you can actually choose more than one, but you have to choose in a separate text message. So how is your organization or your team, if you spearhead a department, how are you guys preparing to maintain and rethink equity and inclusion for this next wave of working? Is it you're reviewing all of your DE&I policies to make sure that they're inclusive and it's really modeling the future of the workplace? Are you creating multiple layers of communications plans that are consistent, inclusive, and mindful of diversity? Are you creating the continuation of virtual meetings, or will be creating virtual meetings and events to really maintain the connection for those members of identity-based groups? Are you identifying what protective measures you need to be in place to support the most vulnerable of your workplace population and really making that best practice for everyone? And then also it could be including diverse perspectives and creating new ways of thinking, policy making, and organizational changes. Is it identifying equitable ways of workplace flexibility? So is that looking at all your role responsibilities? Are they necessary? Do they complement the people that are the face of your organization? What about work schedules and shifts? Are you thinking about how to do that differently? Or maybe last one is that you're still working on what this might mean for you. So if you'll text us your answer or pull up a browser, the browser is pollev.com/AllisonN677, or you're texting this to 2233 and put in the text message A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. So this is where I really invite you to engage with us. It makes it a lot easier for us to kind of shift and pivot what we put in here and address the things that are important to you. And it's okay if you haven't worked on this yet. That's why we're here, is to really support, like, how do we think about having an inclusive mindset? How do we do and leverage and include diverse perspectives? So go ahead and put in there where you're at today, and whatever you respond, it's totally okay, because this is that safe space that Tiki is talking about. And we are here to help support you to at least start making those first steps towards a more inclusive and equitable workplace when we're talking about that next steps of this workplace wave. So go ahead and feel free to do that. So we've got 2 people who've responded. And I'm going to put something in here that reflects some of the customers I've been working with. All right, we're starting to get a few more responses in.
Thank you for that. It's very helpful.
And there's no right or wrong answer here. So, and you can choose more than one if that's helpful. And we'll close this up in just about 5 seconds. All right, we'll go ahead and lock this up. So I'm glad to see that people have responded in ways that's going to be really powerful for this conversation today. And I'm going to really encourage you to utilize the chat feature or to unmute yourself as we go through our session today. So let's kind of dive into the meat of our conversation today. And so before we dive in, Tiki, will you just kind of share your vision for the conversation today and why this is such an important conversation to have right now before we kind of dive into the meat of this?
Absolutely. So if we think about the whole topic, we've been talking about COVID-19 and specifically how to, as leaders, founders, HR practitioners, or whatever you are, talent leaders, how to really begin to steer your organization with a keen focus on people. And so as we kind of move into this shift of thinking about returning to work, we were in the crisis mode. So what do we really do for inclusion, agility, and flexibility? And this is beyond diversity in a sense of ethnicity or race, but it's really around how different is going to be your organization. So it's between, remote work versus people that's working in the office. Now you have more working parents that may be working from home. And so we may need to expand from a diverse perspective. What are the ideas and perspectives that we need to bring to the table to create more flexibility and sustainability of the future? We do not want to dismiss what we need to do around representation or underrepresented groups, because there are challenges, and that's something, from a historical perspective, we should always maintain. But this is a great opportunity to invite new players to the party, to have your leadership team understand why it's so important to have diverse perspectives at the table, because now you're in a situation where we're not in a controlled environment, and you need those different ideas to think about how do you begin to step forward more accurately. So we want to pull the conversation up just a little bit, not to exclude what you already may be doing from a diversity and inclusion and equity perspective, but this is more so around pulling it up and thinking about, for the future, what are the voices, what are the different groups, ensembles, whatever, teams, people that you need to bring to the table to make sure that the organization can move quickly and flex going forward. So that's just the mindset that we're in today as far as this topic. Does that help? Allison.
Yeah, awesome. I just
Yes,
kind of
sir.
wanted to set the stage so we
Yep.
can get our mind prepared for the content. So thank you so much for that. And what I'd love to share is I'm sure many of you utilize this resource as the Harvard Business Review. And in one of their most recent articles around the topic that we're discussing today, they began to kind of scratch the surface of this. And one of the things that they focused on and stated is that what leaders say and do right now makes up 70% of the difference as to whether an individual or a group of individuals feel included. This really matters because the more people that feel included, the more they're able to speak up and use their voice, contribute and collaborate at higher percentages, which ultimately lifts the organization's performance. And so inclusive leadership is a unique and critical capability that helps organizations adapt to diverse customers, markets, ideas, and talents. The mindsets and practice of inclusion to champion a we agenda and serve the reunion of humanity is going to be powerful. If we do not act upon our intention, we might compromise the future of our organization. Inclusive leadership demands our attention over our afterthoughts, our empathy over our assumptions, and a dignified reperception of each other in equitable ways. Each of us as leaders are called to step up and into the light of our privilege to participate in a cohesive narrative of our greatest collective intention. And so I'm going to be asking a lot of questions during my session, because really this is where, as a coach and as a trainer, asking questions is sometimes better than trying to tell you how to think, right? And so I really want you to consider some of these questions, especially as when Tiki kind of steps into some tangible items to start moving forward and strategic thinking to move forward with. So first question is, how is your organization and HR departments inclusive? What is their inclusive true north? So when you think about that mindset, like how would you define the true north when it comes to equity and inclusion? Are you aware of your language and its impact on inclusion? So just so you know, intention doesn't always equal impact. And inclusion is no longer, as Tiki mentioned, it's not just about like affirmative action, it's a necessary action. And so how are you reflecting and refocusing on what jobs and roles, how they were asked to be pre-COVID and how you're asking them to be post-COVID? What does that inclusive mindset look like, and what problems do you need to solve now that didn't exist before? Number 4, how are you recalibrating your awareness to perceive inclusion, not as a charitable opportunity or tokenism, but rather a necessary part of your organization's evolution and innovation and relevance in this new world? And last question for this area, when you're thinking about key inclusive leadership mindset, is how are you building and strengthening your organization's cultural intelligence that hits on bias awareness, safe space for humility and making mistakes? And then what is your plan of action for a visible and authentic commitment for a long-term journey roadmap? And so with that, kind of begs to think about the agile mindset, particularly in this space, because rapid change in your competition, in demand and technology during this time have really made it more important for organizations to be able to respond and adapt quickly. This isn't anything new that you know, but time-honored mindsets and traditions are being challenged right now, especially when we're thinking about the demands for more speed and responsiveness to serve their internal and external customers. So leaders must find the means to equip people, and it's your responsibility to help equip people to develop their mindset to perceive the agile way of working. Particularly when we're talking about transformation and the definition of initiatives, they tend to fail and deliver full benefits when we don't define what agile looks like, particularly right now. So transforming our mindset, the way that we grow our capacity to look at and diagnose things, and advancing to a more sophisticated stage of emotional development, because at this time, It's not just about the skill set, it's also about our emotional development, is really the key to this next level agile success. So there's 4 principles to consider when incorporating an agile mindset. And some of these are best practices from a technology agile mindset, but I find that it's interesting to incorporate this with a slight tweak to it for this next wave of workforce. Number 1 is to respond to changes and not necessarily the plan. The plan is limiting, and it doesn't always see all sides of what can happen. So giving people permission to shift from this is the plan to what changes have to be made and how will we solve for those changes. Number 2, collaborate with your customers constantly. Sometimes things change so rapidly since customers, internal or external, might not even know what solutions they need for tomorrow. That's why it's crucial to switch from our model of thinking from predicting the future to adapting to what is present. Number 3, build working on solutions, not writing a novel to explain it. So as Tiki loves to say, let's stop admiring the problem now and work towards the solutions that really matter. And number 4, focus more on interactions and people instead of tools and processes. Now, I'm not saying they're not necessary, and Tiki's really going to talk about those tools and processes, but you have to focus on the people in order to execute those tools and processes as well. Let's shift our mindset from thinking of people as objects and move towards how we can pay special attention to communication techniques that are efficient, productive, and builds trust, especially in a time when we are Zoom fatigued and meeting fatigued. And then last but not least, when we're considering alignment is the cornerstone to really move forward our organizations, our teams, and our departments. Leadership team alignment is critical to the health of the organization. According to recent Aon Hewitt Global Best Employer Research Report, they said engagement is derived from the way a senior leader connects with other senior leaders and how effective and accountable, not necessarily how nice, they are as a unit. No leadership team is a perfectly 100% aligned all the time, and a number of the dynamics contribute to teams get out of sync. So cornerstone mindsets for you as a leader and for you to encourage your senior leadership to be thinking about and focus on are 5 things. Number 1, embrace action, but also understand that there's unrelenting pressure to innovate more, to stand out more, but we're in an oversaturated market, so embrace the action and move forward. Number 2, adapt boldly. Decide what not to do. Throw away yesterday's playbook on how to do things because actions that previously drove results probably aren't relevant anymore. Or you can build upon them. Number 3, reliably deliver and execute a strategy to ensure your employees are clear about how they need to execute these new priorities seamlessly. And we've talked about this numerous times, communicate, and then over-communicate to the point where they're making fun of you because you know they're getting it at that point. Number 4, create enduring value and in all actions. Ask yourself, how will this impact our customers and our clients? And then go one step beyond this. What actions will this impact as far as our customers' customers and our customers' clients? Number 5, always display clarity about external trends in the business environment as it shows up in our current situation. Leadership must provide honest and transparent communication in ways that manage fear, stress, and anxiety. And as I start to wrap up, I want you to really consider, as we embrace the unknown, it is clear that leadership accountability will become more important than ever. In fact, it is the crucial element for future-proofing organizations in times of crisis or drastic change. And honestly, I don't even like to use the word unprecedented. Yes, we haven't quite experienced this kind of thing in our lifetime, and we have all experienced change in our organization. We have all experienced change in our communities and our companies. What if we viewed this similarly, but with a different mindset? And perhaps more importantly, it is necessary for encouraging teams to emerge more connected and resilient than ever before. Tiki, I'm going to hand this over to you. Tiki, you're still on mute.
Hold on, sorry about that. I was over here taking some notes on my other computer. So as we always do this, it all starts with leadership. No matter what tools we give you in your toolbox, you have to have a leadership mindset and taking a moment to do the strategic thinking so that you can action. It's interesting, a couple of programs where we're coaching cohort members and we've talked about having that strategic thinking time, sitting with yourself, understanding how you want to position and how you want to show up. What does that mean for how you help enable others to execute? And then preparing for those moments where you have to step in. So we cannot overemphasize that everything that we've been talking about is leadership. And once you have that mindset, now we can shift into the process. So 3 things I want to cover for you today, and I'm going to talk about these things a little different because I do want you to be ahead of the curve and to come to the table with something different. You know, Allison said, let's throw away the playbook of yesterday. I think some of those things, history is important. You know, past experiences is very important, but how do we take it up to the next level? So number 1, in today's environment, you have to leverage and include diverse perspectives. And historically, that may have been a top-down approach. That may have been all of HR or all of IT or whatever the case may be. You have to say, how do we understand what's happening in our organization and bring a multidisciplinary team together to give us insights and perspective about the current state of business, where we have risk and opportunities, and what do we need to move forward to execute. And when you bring these diverse perspectives together, you have to allow people the time or give them the questions. Allison gave you some questions to say, when you come into the meeting, this is what we want to know. Now, facilitating these meetings, obviously, sometimes you have power plays, you have people who are not actively engaged, and just to say it here, you may have different political mindsets, different religious mindsets, different culture mindsets, and we know that going into the play. So some of the things that you can do is send out the questions in advance. You may give people a, lack of a better term, a PowerPoint slide that says, here's your one slide, fill in your information, you have 5 minutes. You may even do what we've been doing here, like polling, putting that question up, allowing people to respond real time, synthesizing that information, taking it and moving it to a smaller team that needs to make decisions. The key is that you need multiple voices. If you continue to do things in a box, in a vacuum, you will have missed opportunities and you will fail the mission. And even if we think about COVID-19, there were indicators from multiple places, and not really sure how we got here, but there were missed opportunities because those voices were not included. So everything down from the top to the bottom, it doesn't have to be a big group. Find a way to get those multiple voices. Find a way to rapid fire kind of feedback, give people time to communicate, and then take those insights and take action. Which leads to the second point. How do you move quickly? When you know where you are, where you're going, where you have risk and opportunities, and what's the perspective and mindset of these groups, you can quickly work with your leadership teams or powers that be, or whoever it is, to say, what are the decisions that we need to make now? I'm just going to give you an example because I always like to do it. I am working with a client today. This is my little cheat sheet. And we're putting together our case scenarios for opening. And so one of the things they were talking to me about is how do we begin to think about this with the lens of people? And so I've put a step process together. So I'll just read for an example. What are the government standards? And that's a very big question. And for this particular client, they're multi-state, multi-location. So what is the White House saying? What is the state government saying? What is the local government saying? And then what's happening in your local community? Because if we just says the federal government is saying this, What I understand what that means at the state, the local, and community level, we can miss. And so one of the things I said you have to put on your radar, what are the indicators that's coming from the external market for you to be able to signal that something is changing across those conditions? The second thing is, I put on here, what are the conditions, the restrictions that's being lifted? So is it we're lifting up safe at home? Okay. Are we lifting social distancing? So really taking their business continuity plan, the way they sent everyone home, and those decisions and working them in reverse. Recognizing there are some outliers. For an example, schools may still be closed. Again, we talked about last week, you may have employees that had critical roles that are not returning. So what are those conditions? So it's just one of those things that once you understand where you are, then how can you quickly make those decisions? Do you have PPE equipment? When was the last time the office is clean? And even though that may fall under, I'm trying to think about the department that handles logistics and office and health and safety, I still need to be asking those questions because I'm thinking about people who are going to be returning to a work environment. Do we need to have someone to come in and reconfigure the workspace? What does that mean? Looking at schedules. Do we want to start with 2 days on, 3 days home, 3 days on, and then ultimately ramp up to a full schedule? So once you have those diverse perspectives, then you can quickly and effectively says, what's the decision we need to make this week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, and begin to build those condition models. And then finally, how do you create flexibility? You keep bringing those teams back, or you share, we took a survey. Here are the decisions that we were trying to decide. Here are the decisions that we made. Now we're going to invite bigger employees in a quick, no more than 3 questions, because if you start getting 5, 6, 7, you've lost people, to join and be a part of the conversation and the solution. And that constant feed of information in a safe way will allow you to see what's in your blind spot, will allow you to see what's in your blind spot. And so I tell you, bring a small but diverse group of multidisciplinary practitioners or people in your organization together. Use those insights to work with leadership teams as what are the decisions we need to make, and this is our roadmap, our time horizon. And then constantly recheck, share what you've gained, what decisions you've made, what are the new inputs that you need as we begin to ramp up. I'm just going to tell you with my particular client, one of the things I said on this particular case, it says, what's your point of view? Because if I don't start with your point of view or your mindset, then no matter what I bring to the table, it's not going to appear that way, and so I need to work through that. And so this particular client says, I'm in no rush to be branded as the person that figured it out. Great. Now we know where we are and how much time we have to get there. So that's what I want to share with you this morning. We've talked about communication. We've talked about different tools to communicate. We've talked about building your change management plan. We've talked about building the coalition to do your opening. All of these things are coming together, and unfortunately, in a very short order, you will be asked, what do we need to do? And you need to be prepared not only from a business perspective, but also from a people perspective, and to be able to guide leaders through this. A lot of people may not understand why you're making the decisions, and so you have to be able to communicate. And I'll use an example. They're lifting the restrictions here in Texas on April the 30th, and they're moving to this 25% model. Some people are ready to go, some people are not. And so as an employer, we have to work through what's our point of view. We talked about federal, state, local, community, and obviously what's best for our business and how do we do that. If you haven't ordered PPE equipment or put things in place, the supply is super low. So think about all of that logistically before you invite the first person back to your office so that you're not held liable or caught off guard because you had time to think through this. So that's just my quick insights. I'm going to pause here. Questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, anything I can answer for you. I
So
think
we
I have
would
a question.
encourage everyone to either write your questions, ideas, best practices, or we could even brainstorm on what your organization is doing right now. You can do this either in the chat room, or feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question, or down at the bottom of your screen, there's a raised hand feature and we can connect that way as well.
So Tim had a response, and Tim, I don't know if this was a response. So I would say yes, instead of all of a sudden everybody go back to work, I think you need to have a strategy. We've talked about Alpha Bravo as an example, Team A, Team B, Team C. We've talked about looking at critical roles. Okay, we're going to send the cleaning crew in first. We're going to send IT in to make sure our infrastructure. We're going to send in facilities to make sure desk. Okay, that's critical depending on your work environment. Now we may bring a subset of leaders back and start holding small meetings in the office, but maybe still social distancing. People can sit in their office or cubes, and then begin to slowly take stock of, paper towel, hand sanitizers, all those types of things. And then just say, we think this team needs to come back first. There's 50 people in this team. We're going to break them up into two. 25 can come back. Their schedule is Mondays and Wednesdays, and, work from home the rest, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so you can slowly get into a groove. But on top of that, what's your sanitation every day? Because the reality is we don't have a cure. The information keeps changing every day. There's speculation that it can come back in the fall. And what you don't want to do is be caught off guard when you can slowly, do you have masks? Do you have people bring their own masks? Do you put guidelines around, sanitation of your mask and hand washing? So there's a lot that you need to, as an employer and a manager, put in place. And I'm just going to tell you, if there's no reason to come back, with the exception that says we got to get back to normalcy, then invite people to says, Tiki, okay, we're coming back. We'd like to see people come back. What does that look like for you? And I'm looking for people to come back once a week. Pick your day, and begin to work with people to be able to do that. So I think that's a very good question.
Vicky, the other thing that I would add to that is, you brought up a good point on looking at this potentially coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And it might come back. I mean, they've even predicted it might come back even more intensely. So today, right now, is the time to prepare for that. So yes, you have to prepare for your people coming back to work now in the next 30, 60, 90 days. But don't lose sight that this could potentially come back.
Mm-hmm.
It could be in the fall. It could be in the winter. We don't know. What we don't know is what we don't know, right? But we do know now that we know how to prepare for things very quickly. We do know now that things that we thought were important in the workplace are either more important or not important at all. And so how do we prepare for that 6 months from now, a year from now? Because that will only help us if something else shows up that will create such an increased change. So where we are not having to pivot last minute, where we'll miss things. Like if we prepare for this now, how much better could this be for individuals, for our organizations, for our economy, both from a community, state, and federal, if we prepared now? So also be talking to your leadership if you're not specifically on that decision-making leadership team. Like encourage them, tell them you've been attending a future forward thinking conversation about how do we develop better for the future of our teams and organizations. And here's the benefit for that. So you guys have had a huge leverage point right now over the course of the last 6 weeks of content, of questions, of tools and resources. I really encourage you to use that as an opportunity now.
Yeah. And I just want to say to make sure you put a process in place for people to self, in a pandemic, an employer can require medical exams such as the temperature as a part of this. So some clients are saying we're going to have people self-certify every day. Some people are doing temperatures when people come into the office, or clients. Make sure that you have a process in place at minimum for that, and explain to people. Some people may feel like their rights are being violated. So what do? Well, you stay at home, because so you got to be able to work through all of those, like I said, political culture, my rights, the constitutional rights, all of those things. But the government has provided guidance on what you can do as an employer, and make sure that you're equipped with that so that you can offset Tiki's personal beliefs versus the safety of everyone else, and what does that mean? And it's not a performance issue. It's just that people are at different levels. They have loved ones at homes that may be in a different level. So don't, like Alice said, don't treat people as objects, treat them as people, and make sure that you're making the most critical decisions.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Shamira.
Yep.
If I can just add something, I think also as HR practitioners, it's very important for us to understand that if, as the employer, we are under our guidance, the employees are returning back to the office, that there is an associated liability with that. And so to kind of highlight what Tiki and Allison are speaking about, which is kind of setting the infrastructure in place to the best of your ability, making sure that there's workplace safety, which is now a part of like adding in COVID, which is not a visible, but certainly something that you can see and feel. But also understanding that there is a certain level of liability that the organization is going to own if, under the guidance of the leadership, they are being asked to come back to the workplace. And so it's very important that those parameters that Tiki and Allison are speaking of are set in place, and more importantly, are taken very seriously, because, and not just the liability, but insurance claims are excessively high. And so most of the claims are not, it just goes into a whole litigious space that I feel like as employers, you have to take into consideration if you're asking your employee population to return.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shamira.
Okay, what else? What else? We have just a few more minutes. If not, Alice, if you want to get our poll up. So bottom line on top, it's leadership plus the processes. They both work hand in hand, and we're hopefully this is giving you something to go back in action with your team.
Yeah. So our last poll question, and I'll just invite you. You don't necessarily have to respond. It's just a question I want you to think about. We've talked about a lot of different mindsets, actions, tools, resources, questions to be asking yourself. Really want to invite you to be thinking about, what is one key action? I'm going to invite you to do more, but what is one key action item from today's session that you'll be working on towards implementing in the next 2 to 4 weeks? And so this can complement, maybe some of the things we talked about at the beginning that the organization or leadership hasn't been focused on, that now it was kind of an aha moment for you. As a leader of a department or team or clients, like, what is one thing that you can focus on that really can help impact, as we've been talking about, that inclusive mindset, the sustainability of agility, diverse perspectives, and really looking at your policies, your practices. Each organization has their own way of doing that, but I really want you to think about, like, what's one key thing that I can do right now that will really move this forward? And this is an open-ended, so you can put in one or two words or a sentence in there. So this is open-ended. So the first response is, plan for the known and unknown with understanding things will continuously change. So be agile. Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that. To speak up, 100%. It is easy to do, to not speak up. I know for me, I'm a processor, so sometimes it's hard for me to speak up in the moment, but I also know that it's important for me to get my voice there. Even if I don't have the answers right now, it's even saying, I don't have all the answers right now, but here are the things that I'm thinking about. Tiki is awesome at strategizing in 5 seconds or less. And what I love is that, this is an opportunity to be able to leverage both mindsets. Both are necessary. Making it clear what the expectations are and aren't. The traditional methods of how to show your productivity in the office may not be fair to others. 100%.
I love that.
That is like awesome. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, that was mine, Allison. I'm trying to think of a way to put that, but I think we have some traditional expectations from the office. If I'm the first one there and the last one to leave, then the boss will see me as I'm the hard worker. And I think there are some employees that will be eager to get back into the office a little bit, and others that may not be so eager. Whether it's maybe they've got kids to take care of at home that aren't back in school. Maybe they've got a sick family member, so they would rather not be in the office as much. And that's got to be okay as well. And we've got to make sure that that the leadership understands that just because that person is not in the office as much does not mean that they're not working hard and contributing. So we've got to make it. I think we as leaders have to make it clear what's okay and what the new what that new normal looks like.
Yeah. I really appreciate that too, because I think also too, while you mentioned it, that says you have to put governors on people, because we may continually tap into the same people over and over again because they're there. They don't have kids, they don't have a wife, they're here, and they say, no, we're not going to do that. So I like that, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we have just a few more minutes as we wrap up our conversation today. Also, someone wrote in the chat, Gemma wrote, to define roles and responsibilities. Yeah, absolutely. This is it's a great time to do that. It's a critical time to do that as well. And also to keep in mind that inclusive mindset when thinking about those roles and the job descriptions of those. So thank you so much for each one of you, for who is here present today, and those of you that'll be watching this in the replay. This has been such a joy for Tiki and I. We get excited every week when we get to do this, and we are in the stages of brainstorming for our next series. We are thinking about how do we become more resilient in this next phase. But we would love to hear from you. What topics would be helpful for you in this next wave of the workforce? Different topics, different questions, challenges that you're coming up with your leaders, with your teams. Tiki and I would love to be able to be a support for you, both from this HR Fireside Chat series, as well as being able to brainstorm with you. And one of the things that we're offering for those of you that are here and also watching the replay, a 30-minute complimentary brainstorming session on any of the topics that we've talked about in the past 6 weeks. You do have to claim this before May 5th, because I tell you what, Tiki and I's schedules are about 2 weeks booked out. So we need for you to claim that now. And one of us or both of us will be on that call with you to just brainstorm with you. And this is also an opportunity for us to be of service to you and for you to be able to stand up and stand out in your leadership role in this time. So Tiki, if there's anything else that you would love to share at this time, let's start wrapping it up.
Yeah, we just want to help people deliver their best. Like Allison said, this has been a pleasure to give back what we know, in anything that we can do. Let's do it together, because we'll change the world together, and we're doing our small part. So thanks for listening to us, and looking forward to seeing you in the next series.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing day. Bye.